Hey everyone! Today we're going to be talking about the Spectre's time in the Silver Age. We'll go over his sudden return after a 20-year disappearance, followed by his adventures working along the likes of Batman, The Flash, and many others. Then we'll go over his traumatic and sudden death at the end of this video. Before we get into all of that, be sure to subscribe to Comic Island for all sorts of videos about comic book characters, new and old. For over a score of years, the Spectre had vanished from the world, with no apparent reason for his disappearance. This all changed at Treasure Castle, once owned by millionaire Ebenezer Olcott, who, before he died, hid his fortune away. Seeking it out was Millicent Myra Olcott, legal heir to the fortune, Stefan Miklos, a psychic investigator, and Detective Jim Corrigan, on police assignment to protect Myra against potential theft. There, Stefan tried to use his abilities to seek out the treasure, but found nothing, so Millicent suggested a seance, which worried Jim Corrigan. Part of the police detective had been missing these last 20 years, and it left him thinking of the Spectre, who could have easily found the treasure in mere moments. Corrigan had been left all alone and without explanation as to what happened to the Spectre, only knowing that he suddenly disappeared shortly after the Second World War. The gathered group did a seance the next day with the medium, and as the woman called out to the spirit world, a spell that had rendered the spirit of the Spectre immobile had been lifted, and Jim could feel his personality dividing in two because of it. Little did everyone know, outside, some criminals seeking revenge against Corrigan drove by and threw a grenade into the room. The Spectre, stirring to life for the first time in decades, was able to sense the danger, lift out of Jim Corrigan, and contain the explosion within his cape, safely bringing it outside. The experience was enough to trigger Stefan's abilities, and he gleaned that the treasure was being held in a nearby warehouse. However, when they arrived there, a group of armed men, led by two gang leaders, Rox and Tuffy, were waiting for them, with an ambush prepared. The rival gangsters had joined forces to take the Olcott fortune and get revenge on Jim Corrigan for his years of excellent police service. Fortunately, the Spectre used his powers to track Corrigan down and arrived just in time to save the man from a hail of bullets. The ghostly hero, by then a mere legend of a crime fighter on Earth 2, thought only to be a myth passed down by the criminal underworld, was almost instantly able to overwhelm and terrify the attackers by growing large enough to swallow their bullets whole and then shooting them back at the crooks through his cape. With that, the Spectre vanished before Corrigan's eyes once more. Millicent got the money rightfully owed to her, and that night, the Spectre once again appeared before Jim Corrigan so they could speak in private. The Spectre explained he was imprisoned within Corrigan by a force the spirit did not understand, and they agreed the Spectre would seek out an explanation for all of this, while Corrigan rounded up any remaining associates of Rox and Tuffy. The Spectre traveled around the world to places of tremendous astral power, in search of an answer to explain his disappearance, yet none of these places yielded any results. He returned when he sensed Jim being attacked by the remaining gang members, easily saving the police detective once more using his size-changing abilities. However, when the crooks were finished off, the Spectre felt drained of all his energy, and was once more pulled back into Corrigan's body by the same force keeping him there all these years. Before he was pulled back in, the Spectre begged Jim to find a man by the name of Paul Nevers, who the spirit sensed would have the answers they sought. Jim obliged and discovered on his way there that Paul Nevers was a small-time crook suddenly pulling off amazing crimes that were baffling the police of Mountain City. Encountering Paul, the Spectre within Jim Corrigan could sense a similar spirit empowering the crook. A being called Asmodeus emerged from Paul, revealing that he arrived on Earth 20 years ago and possessed a man just like the Spectre. However, the Earth could not contain the power of two spiritual beings this strong, so both were rendered dormant simultaneously. When Asmodeus' original host died, the demon was freed, and he obtained a special bullet with ultra-evil powers. The bullet, if used on Asmodeus' new host, Paul, would free the demon and leave the Spectre permanently imprisoned within Jim Corrigan. Thus, the demon tried to force Corrigan to shoot Nevers, but the Spectre's powers were there to cancel the demons out, effectively putting everyone in a stalemate. So the two spirits decided to battle each other directly, in a fight that stretched across space, with the demon hurling a meteor at the Spectre and forming light into matter to ensnare the spirit in a trap. The extended battle continued for some time, being pushed out into the astral plane for a period before returning to the physical world, at which point they began beating each other down with celestial objects. Things only finally resolved back on Earth when Jim Corrigan was able to overpower Paul Nevers, which in turn weakened Asmodeus due to his connection with Paul, and the Spectre was able to use this opportunity to imprison the demon in a realm of nothingness. The demon refused to tell the Spectre why exactly he came to Earth to begin with, but Asmodeus did warn the Spectre that he arranged things so that his master plan could carry on without him, and the Spectre would experience the demon's revenge, regardless of what happened to him here. The Spectre returned to Earth, where he encountered a strange shadow that pulled him into another world called Dis. The Presence spoke out to him, warning that because of Asmodeus, another demon named Shathan, the Eternal, sought to destroy the barrier between Dis and Earth. Fortunately, the Presence also told Spectre that he had the superpower that allowed him to become Time's ally, moving back and forth through it freely. By doing so, the Spectre learned that Dis was part of an evil realm that represented something called psychomatter, a malignant version of regular matter. Shathan represents a powerful evil force that exists on the realm of Dis, and exists as a sort of evil counterpart to a similar cosmic being that looks over the regular universe. In the Spectre's journey throughout time, he noted that many others have fought to keep Shathan dormant over the years. The Spectre comes to suspect this may have been why he was initially created to begin with, to be the latest vanguard against this demon, and so he challenged Shathan in battle. Once again, the Spectre found himself in a conflict raging across the cosmos itself, this one taking spirit and demon directly into the sun, before the Spectre uses his new powers to fling Shathan through time to October 30th, 1961, directly over the Tsar bomb detonation, the largest nuclear explosion in human history. Even this did little more than stun Shathan, but it allowed the Spectre to continue pummeling him across time. He slammed the demon into a giant meteor, an erupting volcano, and finally, the Big Bang itself, which destroyed the demon completely. With the day saved, the Spectre vowed to once again protect the world at the side of Jim Corrigan. Now finally returned to form, the two were pleased with this, happy to be reunited and once again fighting crime like they used to in the 1940s. At the time, neither had any sense of the crises to come. With Jim Corrigan now once again empowered as the Spectre, he began to live his old life of working as a police detective captain and crime fighter, though by now he had broken off his engagement with Clarice Winston for good and moved on to Gateway City. The events of his return robustly split his persona in two, one representing the spiritual superhero known as the Spectre, the other the simple human police detective Jim Corrigan. Though this separation first occurred in World War II, it appeared more robust and consistent than ever before, and would stay this way indefinitely. An interesting example of this in action was when the Spectre and Jim Corrigan tried to save a gambler named Ace Chance from being murdered over a substantial amount of debt. While the Spectre stopped Ace's assailants, the gambler's body was left on the verge of death, and his spirit began to pass on. With the arrival of Jim Corrigan, Ace instead was able to possess the detective, who had become a sort of vessel for this kind of thing, and the new spirit forced Jim Corrigan to flee the sea. Without a host body, this left the Spectre weakened, while Ace, armed with supernatural knowledge from the afterlife, strengthened himself with the special radiation apparently emitted by all evil men in the world of Earth 2. To solve this problem, the Spectre flew around the world, absorbing radiation emitted by good people like a member of the Peace Corps, Vietnam soldiers, ... religious people, and staff at a hospital. With all this newfound energy, the Spectre was able to remove Ace Chance's spirit from Jim Corrigan, and the two battled, with Ace summoning demonic flying lizards to battle the Spectre. Though the ghostly vigilante proved victorious against these creatures, and a number of other evil obstacles Ace was able to summon, including a death cult, a witch's spell, and a primordial demon called Sorabu, an elemental creature once worshipped on Earth by pagans. Fortunately, with every victory against these forces of evil, the Spectre grew stronger in goodness, allowing him to prevail and literally shove Ace Chance into his old body, removing Chance's new ghostly powers. The Spectre and Corrigan had saved the day again, though thanks to his time possessed, Corrigan found himself having to cancel his resignation with the police department and discovered he was now engaged to a woman named Mona Marcy. Some time before the Spectre returned, Jay Garrick, also known as the Flash, discovered that he, the Justice Society of America, and all other superheroes of their world existed in a multiverse, with an infinite number of other worlds and variations on Earth. Jay Garrick and Jim Corrigan's home was known as Earth 2, while another Earth featuring other versions of similar heroes was discovered by Garrick, called Earth 1. On Earth 1, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman also existed, but emerged much later in the 20th century, along with other new heroes that took on similar identities to the Justice Society, but with different identities and stories behind the masks. So Earth 1 had a Green Lantern and a Flash, but they were named Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, unlike on Earth 2, where those individuals were named Alan Scott and Jay Garrick. And each version of the hero had their own history, personality, and set of superpowers. On Earth 1, just like on Earth 2, a group of superheroes gathered together and formed a team. But while they were called the Justice Society of America on Earth 2, they were called the Justice League on Earth 1. Since that discovery, the Justice Society, now somewhat older but still active as superheroes, would occasionally work with the Justice League to combat various threats and crises that would emerge. And both teams worked hard to protect worlds from invaders and other sources of danger from across the multiverse. After a number of such adventures between the Justice League, the Justice Society, and other versions of Earth, the Justice Society was officially revived. Even the Spectre's fellow founding junior member, Johnny Thunder, returned with his wish-granting partner Seiyu the Thunderbolt for an adventure. Though that foray nearly wiped out the Justice League from history entirely, temporarily turned Earth 1 into Earth A, and the adventure itself was not remembered by everyone involved. These recurring events, which often involved at least two worlds in peril or rapid changes happening to reality, came to be known as the Crisis on Multiple Earths. The Spectre, however, was not involved with this crisis at first, as its beginnings took place before his return. It was only after he was restored as a superhero that he rejoined the Justice Society and soon enough encountered his first multiversal threat. One day, residents of Earth 1 and 2 began inexplicably appearing in front of one another on the wrong Earth. A man golfing on one Earth suddenly found himself in a boxing ring on another, while other superheroes and villains were switched around too. At the same time, the Spectre was called upon by fellow JSA member Starman to deal with some asteroids heading towards Earth, when his body was suddenly turned to smoke and pulled away by a cosmic force. While the displaced JSA and Justice League of both worlds formed impromptu teams together and desperately fought to preserve order in the resulting chaos of people switching worlds, the Spectre found himself in a strange realm that represented the space in between Earths 1 and 2. In this realm, on the border of reality and nothingness, Corrigan found himself face to face with a strange being who glowed an unknown energy that weakened the Spectre. Using his supernatural senses, the spirit was able to determine that this mysterious being came from the antimatter universe, a universe that, as the name implies, comprises of antimatter, which instantly explodes if it comes in contact with regular matter. The Spectre instantly realized that this being, if it came in contact with Earth 2 or 1, would destroy either. But since Corrigan was a spirit, the Spectre wasn't composed of regular matter at all, and thus he attacked in force. However, for once, the Spectre found himself completely outclassed. The antimatter man began distorting the Spectre's body with ease, able to pummel the spirit into submission within a few seconds. The strange man then began heading towards Earth, while the Spectre made a grim realization. The displacement was the result of Earths 1 and 2 being set on a collision course with each other. This was all apparently happening due to an experiment by Ray Palmer's assistant, Enrichetta Negrini, whose space warping machine forced the Earths on a trajectory towards each other, and appeared to spark the interest of the antimatter man. Thus, even if the Spectre were to stop the antimatter man, both worlds were doomed anyways, and would collide with each other in moments. With the antimatter's glow no longer holding the Spectre back, the spirit opted to focus on one problem at a time, grew to a colossal size, and was able to physically hold the two Earths apart without harming either planet, since they were still in a strange in-between realm the Spectre called warp space. Though this worked for a time, the force compelling the two Earths together was so strong Corrigan would not be able to hold them apart indefinitely, and gradually was forced to shrink himself down in size as the planets pulled towards each other, weakened him more and more. So the Spectre reached out to fellow JSA member Dr. Fate for help, and to warn him of the creature from the antimatter universe heading straight towards Earth 2. In response, Dr. Fate summoned a number of involved superheroes from both Earths and coded them in magic to protect against the antimatter, while also empowering the Spectre to buy them more time before the two Earths collided. Together, the heroes of both worlds battled the antimatter man on top of the Spectre's body. The battle proved difficult as the antimatter man was incredibly powerful. This mysterious being barely reacted when the Justice League and Justice Society attacked together, and was brutal and efficient at pushing them back, able to alter the bodies of the heroes in similar ways to what he did to the Spectre earlier, without showing any concern for the consequences of his actions. Yet the Spectre was able to help out by augmenting his own body as they fought, using his cape to cushion the heroes when they were knocked down, while enhancing other heroes' powers to better use against the antimatter man. Together, the JSA and the Justice League combined their strengths into a singular blow that knocked the antimatter man off of the Spectre's back and into the depths of space. While the teams continued their attack, the Atom of Earth 1 appeared before the Spectre with a plan. Ray Palmer could shrink the Spectre down to an inch in height, then grow him back to normal size in an instant. As the Atom's technology was still new at the time, this would explode the Spectre's body, destroying the spirit, but the resulting force would be more than enough to safely push both Earths apart and stop the collision for good. The spirit consented to this plan, happy to sacrifice himself to save two worlds. The resulting explosion put the two worlds back in a stable and safe position, and Ray Palmer was happy to see the Spectre reform in front of him. Though the spirit's body was destroyed and the Spectre was blasted across the warp space realm, the Spectre was able to maintain conscious control over his spiritual essence, and was able to put all the parts of his body back together by deliberately altering his body with magnetic properties before he exploded. The Spectre and the Atom then raced off to the antimatter man, with the spirit reaching a tremendous speed that was able to knock the creature back into the antimatter universe. And with that, Jim Corrigan saved two worlds. The Justice Society returned to Earth 2 along with everyone displaced to Earth 1. Though the Spectre didn't know it yet, his involvement in multiversal adventures were far from over. Corrigan had no idea these adventures might connote a weakened barrier between worlds, or worse, that the presence of an antimatter universe and a being invading the regular universe was a dark omen of a much bigger crisis that would one day consume the Spectre and an infinite number of worlds. One day on Earth 2, Barry Allen, the Flash of Earth 1, came to this alternate Earth on a visit. He was touring the country when he stopped by Central City to meet up with the Spectre, who he had met during the crisis of two Earths. On his way, however, Barry came upon a suspicious pair of men loading a shopping cart full of cash into a truck. It was no difficulty for the Scarlet Speedster to catch up to the truck, but he found it unusually hard to vibrate past the truck door's molecules, something he could normally do with ease. Though he ultimately was able to phase through the truck, it left the Flash badly weakened, and he collapsed right in front of the criminals. The crooks promptly kicked Flash out of the moving vehicle, as they were ordered to by a mysterious benefactor, and happily raced off with their money. With the Speedster now exposed, the being behind all of this, a ghost of a pilot named Luther Jarvis, who died during World War I, was able to summon the Phantom Flash, a spectral version of Barry Allen, who would do the ghost pilot's bidding. Sometime later, Jim Corrigan was called in to investigate the disappearance of Jarvis's old squad from his days as a pilot. The Spectre was able to determine the ghost pilot and the mysterious Phantom Flash were behind this, and the two agreed it would be best for the Spectre to handle this one on his own, separate from Corrigan. The Spectre tracked Jarvis down to Castle Creek, where the ghost pilot was forcing an old member of his squad into a battle using antique planes. Jarvis nearly killed his old wingmate with the help of the Flash, until the Spectre intervened and blocked the attack with a giant-sized hand. The enormous Spectre grabbed Jarvis's plane and threatened to crush the ghost if the Flash attacked. Given the ghostly nature of the Spectre, he was more than capable of doing such a thing, even if Jarvis was a ghost himself, and knowing this, Jarvis quickly agreed to a truce. The two sat down with Jarvis's old squad inside the castle, and the dead pilot explained how he was challenged to a battle here at the end of World War I, but he was the only one of his squad who answered a Baron's call for a duel, and the others didn't show up. They explained that the duel took place on the last day of the war, November 11, 1918, and the squad didn't want to risk death knowing an armistice was moments from being declared, truly believing Jarvis wouldn't have gone either. Luther Jarvis died that day, and his plane was shot down into a bog near the castle. But the fog of the bog turned him into a ghost pilot. The Spectre pointed out the dishonor in Jarvis's actions as a ghost, and the pilot agreed that he had behaved poorly and unbecoming of a man of the military, though he insisted he still deserved some kind of justice for what happened to him. So the Spectre agreed to another duel in the sky, but this time with the Spectre and the Flash acting as champions for both parties. Jarvis agreed, with the lives of Barry and the veterans waged on the outcome of the battle. In no time at all, the two antique planes once again took to the sky, now both supernaturally empowered. While the ghost pilot was able to telepathically offer the Speedster his expertise in using the plane. Since neither pilot was confined by the laws of human nature, the battle got pushed out into space, and the Spectre was shot down onto the surface of Mars, where Barry Allen attacked on foot. The Phantom Flash proved powerful in this form, able to land blows that actually hurt the Spectre, thanks to their shared ghostly nature. While the power of the Speed Force gave Barry an advantage over the Spectre, who was forced to hide in the tail of a comet. Luckily, when the Flash discovered him, the molecules in the tail of this comet had unique properties that turned Barry back to normal. The two heroes got in Allen's plane and they returned home, but the change in circumstance compelled the ghost pilot to attack yet again. Jarvis, in a moment of desperation, rammed his own plane into theirs, but the Spectre was able to save himself and Barry from the resulting explosion. This final attack consumed the spiritual essence of the ghost pilot, and with that, his victims were freed. The Spectre and Barry returned home, hoping that Luther's spirit had found peace. This was the Spectre's first real time working one-on-one with a superhero from Earth-1, but it would hardly be the last. In Gotham City of Earth-1, Batman was the guest of honor in the city's Chinatown, as part of a celebration for the start of the Year of the Bat. Batman enjoyed the happy celebration and appreciated the talents of a young musician named Danny, son of Chinatown's unofficial mayor, Bill Wu. Unseen, in an abandoned warehouse nearby, an ancient noble spellcaster called Shanzi, the River Lord, cast a spell to restore his strength. He emerged at full power in front of a gathered crowd outside and erected a giant wall around Chinatown, which no mortal could pass. At the same time, Jim Corrigan, perhaps inspired by Barry Allen, was visiting Gotham City from Earth 2 in order to observe the famous police force in action. He and Commissioner Gordon were alarmed to see the impossible wall emerge out of nowhere, and not even a helicopter could fly over it. In the fray, Jim Corrigan slipped away and summoned the Spectre, who, not being a mortal, was able to slip through the wall. The Spectre managed to track the River Lord down by dividing himself into several mirror images. This worked, but divided his power and left him exposed when one of the copies stumbled on Shanzi. The Spectre struggled to hold off the powerful sorcerer while he recalled his other forms, and seeing a number of specters all flying through the air and converging into one location, allowed Batman to follow straight to the battle. The Spectre managed to reform himself, saving the hero from being crushed against a wall by Shang-Chi. He then grew in size and attacked the sorcerer, but the River Lord was able to entrap the Spectre in magical dragon heads and sent the ghost out into space. Fortunately, Batman was able to save the hero with a well-timed grappling hook before the Spectre could get out of Earth's orbit. Yet Shanzi used this opportunity to flee, hypnotizing Danny and seeking to use the young man as his successor. Batman managed to stop Danny just as he was about to cast a spell on behalf of the River Lord that would have destroyed the two heroes. Meanwhile, the Spectre was nearly disintegrated by Shanzi, who poured all his supernatural energy into a crushing hold that held back the awesome powers of the Spectre. It left the River Lord on the verge of death, using up all his energy holding back a being so strong. Thanks to some fireworks Batman found in a nearby warehouse, the Caped Crusader was able to overpower Shan, leading the villainous magician to become unstable and die, fading away into nothingness as his power dissipated around them. With that, the Spectre and Batman enjoyed a new fireworks display put on by the grateful people of Chinatown. The day was saved, and their first partnership together was an official success. Following his adventure with Batman, Jim Corrigan returned to his home of Gateway City on Earth 2. One day, the detective captain was shocked to see a man running out of a costume shop dressed as a pirate. The man claimed to be Captain Skull and had ghostly powers that weakened the Spectre. Corrigan and the Spectre learned this was a reincarnated pirate from the past that possessed an important American ambassador named Joseph Clanton. By consulting an astral plane, the Spectre learned that this reincarnation featured a type of power called mega-cyclic energy that would be deadly to the Spectre. In spite of this, the Spectre managed to fling Captain Skull through time, freeing the ambassador, while the spirit of the pirate began possessing other individuals throughout history, such as a knight in medieval times. Captain Skull and the Spectre raced through time like this until the pirate got fed up and summoned cosmic winds that began to tear the Spectre apart. The Spectre fled to a quasar, infusing himself with mega-cyclic energy that he could handle because it wasn't corrupted by Captain Skull. And with that energy, the Spectre was finally able to safely contain the spirit of the pirate, returning him to his original body back in time and the ambassador safely home. Thus began a series of adventures with Corrigan and the Spectre protecting Gateway City. Joining the police department, Corrigan was better appreciated here than in Central City, and quickly gained a reputation for being able to solve impossible crimes. By this time it was clear the Spectre was operating much more independently than before in the 1940s, as he now often worked with the Justice Society on his own, while Corrigan only called upon the spirit for actual mysteries that required the powerful superhero. Otherwise, the Spectre would only return to Corrigan to recharge his spectral energies within Jim's body. Meanwhile, Corrigan continued to pursue his romance with Mona Mercy. and even though their engagement began when Jim was possessed by Ace Chance, Jim began to feel genuine affection towards her. Together, Corrigan and the Spectre faced down threats such as Dirk Raleigh, who created a magical psychic copy of himself and could only be defeated by having both copies attacked simultaneously by Corrigan and the Spectre. Though the two succeeded, it was a remarkable feat that nearly cost Jim his job and required him being shot out of a cannon so he could hit Dirk, who was flying a plane. In another adventure, the Spectre came upon a fellow superhero in the JSA, Wildcat, who had been injured and laid helpless before him. The Spectre revived a devastated Wildcat, who explained a man named Happy Jack Dole did this to him, using mysterious powers of mental control. Jack gained these powers and many others after being exposed to the spirit of a cosmic alien sorcerer. Happy Jack fashioned a costume for himself and decided to destroy Gateway City, in revenge for him feeling like the city never treated him all that well to begin with. Fortunately, the Spectre was able to block an attack from Jack Dold and removed his powers, sending the cosmic energy it gained control of to the edge of time and space, while Dold was arrested. With the day saved, the Spectre advised Wildcat to seek an interest in helping people. The Spectre and Corrigan were happy to see that the Wildcat took the spirit's advice, later opening a gym that teaches youngsters how to box. Shortly after this, the Spectre and Corrigan came up against another human empowered by an alien force. This time a young boy under control of a mysterious and powerful entity that could seemingly control all of reality on Earth. The Spectre could barely keep up with the boy's imagination, which led to an incredible path of destruction. The entity seemed to be powered by an evil act of destroying worlds. As Spectre discovered, it traveled from planet to planet, possessing individuals and feeding off the carnage they ultimately would create. This put the Spectre in a tough situation, where Corrigan and he began seriously weighing the life of a boy against all of Earth 2. Though more than capable of killing the boy, the Spectre couldn't bring himself to do it, and swore he would simply stand in the way of the entity, forcing this being to battle the Spectre, even if they had to do so for all eternity. This turned out to be the correct solution to the problem, as by choosing the good, but much more difficult path, the evil entity was expelled. As it was empowered by darkness, an act of pure good forced it away into oblivion. It was after this that the Spectre and Corrigan found themselves against an old foe, although they didn't know it at first. Working behind the scenes, a returned psycho-pirate was able to nearly force the two partners to turn on one another, after causing the Spectre's mere presence to make people panic every time he got near them. Jim Corrigan then suddenly felt compelled, refusing to let the Spectre back into Jim's body and thus preventing the ghostly hero from being able to recharge. Since the Spectre first encountered him in the 1940s, psycho-pirate's superpowers had greatly expanded, giving him complete control over human emotions and allowing him to engineer this plan and drain the Spectre of his formidable power. This was all part of an elaborate plan on behalf of Psycho Pirate to free himself from a magical mask forced on him by Dr. Fate earlier. By draining the Spectre's powers, Psycho Pirate hoped to free himself, but he ended up imprisoned in the body of none other than Gat Benson, the man who originally murdered Jim Corrigan years ago. Thanks to a magical globe found by Psycho Pirate, and with the gun, the magic bullet created by Asmodeus upon Spectre's return in the 1960s, Corrigan was almost murdered all over again in front of a helpless Spectre, as both Spectre and Corrigan were forced to feel crippling fear by Psycho Pirate, while the villain gave Benson the magical gun and ordered the man to attack. Fortunately, when it came to Gat Benson using the magical bullet himself, he was terrified over the memory of what happened to him the first time he killed Corrigan. So instead he attacked Psycho Pirate, freeing Corrigan long enough to knock both Benson and Psycho Pirate out. Jim Corrigan was able to save the Spectre, and he comforted the ghost and helped him get over the fear Psycho Pirate put in him, allowing the spirit to merge with the detective once more so they might recharge for whatever came next. Following the Spectre's foray with Psycho Pirate, the spirit was pulled into a hell dimension called Gingpo with a boy from Gateway City named Billy. They were attacked by the demon that brought them to this dark domain, a being called Nawar, who the Spectre defeated by clubbing the creature with a giant shoe and tied him up in twine. The Spectre and Billy made their way through an astral plane that brought them into conflict with a group of pilgrims that worshipped and managed to free Nawar, and the cult summoned the demon to Earth. Working with Billy and Jim Corrigan, the Spectre was able to forever banish Nawar back to Gamepo. The Spectre then told Corrigan a bedtime story about the two of them battling a ghost of a criminal named Frankie Barron, who tried to rob a large sum of money only to die in the process, and ended up haunting the money. This story helped Corrigan fall asleep, but it is unclear if the adventure ever actually happened or if the Spectre just made it up. Not long after this, the Spectre went on a particularly harrowing adventure, the exact details of which he never revealed to anyone, but it left him particularly exhausted, and in desperate need to return to Jim Corrigan's body to regenerate, as he would sometimes need to do back in this time period. However, at the moment, Corrigan was pinned down by a number of crooks, who had him at gunpoint. Jim had been awake for 48 hours, and like the Spectre, was very tired. He demanded the spirit help him before he allowed the Spectre back into his body, which the Spectre accepted, quickly striking out at the foes with an overwhelming blow to get things over with as quickly as possible. The Spectre then re-entered Corrigan's body, and the two left, so exhausted they failed to notice that the Spectre accidentally hit and almost killed an innocent person in his rushed attack. That night, the Spectre was ripped out of Corrigan's body and brought to the gates of heaven, where he was called out by the presence for his impatience and what it determined was all too human behavior. It decided to give him a second chance, however the presence gave the Spectre a new weakness as a reminder for what the spirit had done. The weakness's exact nature would change from time to time, and would only appear in moments of stress, when he was likely to act rashly again. The Spectre was then sent back to Corrigan's body. Under these new circumstances, the Spectre faced down a strange man named Narcan. 200 years ago, Narcan had obtained tremendous knowledge through magic and was on the verge of becoming the most powerful entity in the universe. The spirit's new weakness was suddenly revealed when he lost his sight. Fortunately, the Spectre was able to rely on psychic energies, and by concentrating carefully, he was able to defeat Narcan, though to the Spectre he was known only as the Evil One. This being's power was dispersed across the universe, while Narcan's mind became inert. The spirit returned to Corrigan's body, unaware that for the spirit, things were only going to get worse. Following the events that left the Spectre with his new weakness, the spirit was left conflicted about himself. When Jim Corrigan witnessed a criminal shoot a police sergeant, wounding the man, the Spectre flew into a rage, emerged from Corrigan's body, and outright killed the criminal. When the police sergeant himself objected to the superhero's actions, the Spectre struck that man too, horrifying Corrigan. The detective captain decided to no longer allow the Spectre back into his body, so the spirit tried to force his way in. This act proved a breaking point in their relationship, and Corrigan told the spirit to leave and never return. With the decades-long partnership between the Spectre and Corrigan officially ended, the spirit found himself once again summoned by the force that created him to begin with. Though referred to as the Presence in other contexts, at this time it was also increasingly implied to be the force of God itself. Whatever this entity was, it was furious with the Spectre's actions, and was ready to end the spirit's mission on Earth. In an act of mercy, it gave the Spectre a chance to make things right, but never again as before. Instead, it gave him the Journal of Judgment, which would assign the spirit tasks to complete without personal intervention or choice. The Spectre, realizing how wrong his recent behavior had been, agreed to repent as instructed, and was magically bound to this book. The Spectre's first task was to pass judgment on a man named Frederick Frost, who sold his soul to a demon, the famed Beelzebub himself. Ultimately, Frost and a corrupt policeman were handed over to the devil at the Spectre's behest. Next, he was tasked with apprehending another criminal named Hickley. No longer bound or even interacting with Jim Corrigan, the Spectre began to focus on what the book commanded him to. He investigated a murderer named Felix, and observed another named Johnny who sacrificed himself to save a child in spite of his fears. Now little more than a passive observer of people good and bad, the Spectre would often determine what to do with these souls. The Spectre would even spare some lives, such as a man named Allie, who felt bad about trying to murder somebody after being taunted into it over a reward. And instead the Spectre claimed the soul of Allie's bully, since the bully was the one who provoked the attack. Thus, the Spectre could sometimes interact with his targets to a degree, such as when he confronted a criminal ventriloquist named Vargo. Presumably, the Spectre was left to complete the entire Journal of Judgment before he was imprisoned in a tomb, tasked to only help humanity when called upon. This happened about a year later, when he was summoned by fellow founder of the JSA, Dr. Fate. Another crisis had emerged in the form of a master world builder from a distant galaxy named Creator 2. This being wanted to force Earths 1 and 2 together into an amalgamated planet, so that he might have enough energy from the resulting experiment to create an entirely new world. The Spectre once again found himself the only force holding Earths 1 and 2 apart once again, though the situation was much more dire this time, and the Spectre had to flatten his corporeal form severely to essentially pry the two planets apart, since they were already so close to each other. Just like last time, holding these two worlds apart in the warp space proved a tremendous strain on the Spectre's body. Unlike the Spectre's first experience holding two worlds apart, because the planets were so close to each other this time around, he couldn't shrink himself down any further. It began to destroy him. While the spirit protected these two worlds, Dr. Fate and Seiyu the Thunderbolt defeated Creator 2. But by the time this crisis had ended, and the heroes were able to send Earths 1 and 2 once again farther apart from each other, the Spectre was left diminished to a level even his powers couldn't recover from. With this last heroic sacrifice, the Spectre was atoned for his sins, and experienced a moment of peace, as his corporeal body collapsed in warp space. Though mourned by the Justice Society and the Justice League, the heroes couldn't help but feel that somewhere, in some form, the ghostly hero remained. After all, he was one of the most powerful among them, and it was hard to believe that that power diminished entirely. Indeed, they turned out to be right, and it wouldn't be long before he would emerge in the Bronze Age.